Now, ganaching and having a sharp edge on a cake is so very important. And once you have that canvas sharp and clean, and draping it will be much more easier and convenient. So the outer look is like precise and with precision, no flaws and stuff like that. Now, the same technique can be used for buttercream as well. So buttercream and ganache, the sharp edges technique is exactly the same. Now, what method that I will be using now is a board-to-board method. And this is what I've been following for myself personally for so many years. And even if I have to like make 10 cakes together, this will be the method I will go to. I wouldn't go back to the freehand method of ganaching anytime, because this will give me precise results all the time. And all my students to whom I teach, I make them do this method, and right from the several years before the online course. And I'm sure the winners of the competition, which I'll be again discussing, the ones who will be getting that as the winning prize as well. And so that particular course was like a 24/7 mentor support system, which I've been doing like past 8 years or so. All of them who are like everywhere around the world now, they all follow this method even till date. So before I start teaching this method, one recommendation I give to people who learn this, you kind of need to unlearn what you've been doing if your ganaching method was a bit different. You can't be using some parts of the method that you were already doing and include that to some part of what I'm teaching. So you cannot combine two different techniques with the one that I will be teaching. So you need to completely undo what you've been doing and follow the method in the order of the instructions that I will be giving now. And only then you will be able to get the results. Now, if I say move the turntable, keep it on the working table, then you will have to follow that. Then if there's hot water, you will have to follow that. Holding the scraper, all that I will break down into smaller, simpler steps. The video is for you to keep. And you have to go back to the video every time to understand every step and follow each of them as exactly as they are. So you get the same results which I will be getting now, which I will do in the live and show. Okay. So let's go into the process. That is a working board, and this board like needs to be like really big. The cake that I'm going to use is a 6-inch diameter round cake. I will be doing the double barrel, but in the process, there is one change between the double barrel and the regular ganaching. In the double barrel, we will have doubles in between. In the regular cake, we will not be having the double. So the double part you will ignore if you're going to do the sharp edges on a regular cake. The doubles will be included if you're working on a double barrel, but I'm going to show this on this particular one cake. Now that is a 6-inch cake. This should be like around 12-inch. You want it like really big because you'll be placing the scraper on the sides of the cake, and you need like extra space, ground space on the board that you're working. We call this working board, okay? And then we will be having two other boards, and I use acrylic board. And so one of it is like a 2 mm wide, and the other one is a 3 mm wide. But you can use both of them 3 mm. If you are a beginner to this particular technique, then you will get a 3 mm acrylic board, which is 6.25 inches. Now, if your cake is 6 inches in diameter, the board you will use is 6.25. Omcraft is a vendor based in Bombay. He ships pan India, and he knows the 6.25. And obviously, you need a hole in the center of the board, and that is used for stacking to pass through the center dowel, which is also important. So you will use a board with a hole in the center, and then a 3 mm board if you are a beginner. Once you get used to the technique and you have like a freehand result every time, then you can move over to a 2 mm board. The thickness is a variation, I'm just saying. So 3 mm is easier for beginners. Now, I'm going to place one of the board on the working board, for which I will be needing the ganache. Now, the ganache recipes and the sponge recipes are all given to you. I'm going to add some ganache. I'm piping. I have the ganache in the piping bag. So this ganache sticking to the working board, and then we have the acrylic board on top, and that's for the acrylic board to not move from the working board. Okay. And now I'm just going to start placing the cakes and layer it, for which I just need some ganache on the acrylic board. And that is for the cake to stick onto the acrylic board and not move. So I'm just spreading it out a bit. Start placing. The cakes are toasted. Now, sure, if you're able to see, the acrylic board is here, right? And the cake is in the middle. So you want this extra space in the acrylic board, and that gap will be filled by the ganache, right? So you have to make sure that the cake is in the middle and not coming outside of the acrylic board. Now, you can add any filling. Now, if you're using soft filling, so obviously you can just do a dam, but I'm just going to use ganache itself. You can just pick up the ganache from the bowl and use a spatula to spread as well, whichever is easier. So this one, you can just continue with what is comfortable for you to fill your cake. So now for a double barrel, you need equal height below placing the double. So there's going to be like a considerable amount of height. Double barrel is when the height of the cake is like more than the diameter of the cake. So sometimes it's like a 6-inch cake, and a 6-inch tall one doesn't have to be treated like a double barrel. But when a 6-inch cake is like 8-inch tall, then you will need a double barrel. The TV is gone. So I'm placing the second layer. I'm making sure the layering is good. I'm filling it. So I'm going to have 4 layers of the cake. Now I have 8 layers. I need equal number of layers as the number of layers below placing the double, and above the doubles have to be equal. So 8 layers will be divided into 4. So let me just place the 4 layers, and then I'll move on to the next step. Third layer up, making sure it's in the middle, filling on top of the third layer. Just to make it easy, I'm just going to keep it down. Okay, so there are 6 layers for me, and that will be 6 at the bottom, and I mean 3 at the bottom and then 3 on the top. Now, assume that you are not working on a double barrel, then this is the stage you will start working on the sharp edges. And now, because this is a double barrel, I'm going to go ahead and place the doubles here. I'm just going to level up this ganache. Now, so hope you guys are with me. We are setting up a double barrel cake. For a double barrel cake, the height is going to be more than the height of the cake, right? And what I have here is 3 more sponges to go. and then 3 sponges are layered again already on the board. Now, if I'm going to start putting up these cakes on top of the ones that I've already placed, it is going to be like too tall and it may collapse because it does not have any support. To add that extra support, I have another board. So this is the 6-inch, so 6.25-inch acrylic board, right? For a double barrel, you need a board that is smaller than the one that you've used on the bottom, and this is going to go on the top. Now, this is a 5.25 inches board that is going to go here. And now this is going to act like a support for me. Now, I will also need dowels. I have a dowel cutter here with me, and those are plastic dowels again. Om Craft would be having this. And any baking supply stores, I'm sure he is a supplier to many baking supply store in different other cities. And these sturdy plastic dowels are good. And this I'm going to use in, and then I'm going to follow a method to show you how many dowels would it need. And that needs to be placed on this particular section of the cake. Now, I have a toothpick with me. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to place this board here in the middle, and I'm going to use a toothpick to go around and then mark around on this board. And I am also going to wooden dowel. Yeah, wooden. Now, the whole thing will be stacked, right? I want to check if this hole and the hole on the board that is at the bottom that I have placed, if they are aligned together. If the board is like a little moved away, and if this hole and the hole on the bottom board are not in sync, then we have trouble. Now, to find that out, I'm just going to push this in and lift this board up, hold it in my hand, and then just make sure if that passes through. Or what I'm going to do, pass this through the bottom, making sure I'm just doing it straight. And now that dowel has come out, and I'm going to place this board through that dowel. Okay, so now that will be the position for my board to go in. Now, if I have to place the board, I need to pass it through this particular dowel. Okay, so I'm sure the ganache is stuck here. I'm going to level that layer of the cake. I'm going to remove off this ganache, level that part. So before placing the dowel, I just want the ganache to be leveled. So microwave panita. Soften panita ganache. Let me just get some ganache a bit microwave so it is easier to spread. It's a bit thick for me to spread it out evenly. Now this dowel, the center dowel will stay before I start with ganaching the sides. So we know why we've placed that rod, that center dowel, the wooden one, is to make sure the hole on the bottom board will align with the center board that I will place. So I have a bit thinner consistency ganache here that's been microwaved now, and that is a bit easier to spread. to just level it up. So just going to clean up the ganache here on the side. I just picked up not much, but just cleaning it up. Just so you could see through how I'm going to place the dowels. So into this, there is going to be a 5-inch board, right? So I'm just going to mark a circle well within that 5-inch board. So the board is going to come and I'm going to have a circle within that board that I will be using. So let me pass through that board now for you to understand. Now this is going to go all the way in here, right? I'm not going to place because it's going to catch up on the ganache and then take it out. Now that circle I have is a circle that will be within this particular board. Now on that circle, I'm going to mark dowels that are about 2 inches away. I'm going to use a scale and I have a marking. I'm not sure if you're able to see, maybe on the top angle, if you can see that. I think it's too dark. Let me just check on the camera for the top angle. I think, hmm? No, it's still dark. But this is the hole, but I don't think they can see. Well, you can show it on the side itself, like I'll just turn and show. Okay, so I'm just marking the first dowel here and using the scale, I'm going to go around and measure 2 inches apart. So the dowel marking always has to be 2 inches apart for a stable stacking. And the same logic we will be using for stacking a 2-tier or even a 3-tier cakes or even more. So the gap between every dowel will be 2 inches apart. So now I have made the markings. I'm sure whether you will be able to see. Yes. So there are dowel markings in the circle and that circle size is smaller than the board that you will place. And I have 5 of them marked because I need them 2 inches apart. Now into one of that, I'm going to insert dowel. I have a pencil. I'm going to go to the level of the cake and with the pencil, I'm going to mark where exactly the dowel ends. Take that dowel out and the pencil marking is here. Okay, so I'm going to use a dowel cutter and then cut exactly at that marking. So I have the first one, and the second one I will be placing it on the table and get to the eye level and use the pencil again. You need to get to the eye level so you know that the height of the dowel was just exactly the same. So second one, pencil marking is here. Okay, and I'll just cut it through. So I'll go back to the first one, which I used for the marking, okay? And I'll use the same thing for every other dowel that I will cut. Get to the eye level, that's more important. Third dowel marking done. I have 3 dowels, 2 more to go. I'll go back to the same first dowel that was measured and cut. I have the fourth one. Now for the last one. Marked, and I'm going to cut. So once I have all the numbers that I need, I will have to keep them on the table like so and ensure if all the dowels are of the same height. Okay, so now show if you're able to see only if you get down to the eye level. Yeah, they look the same height. Now I'm just going to put the first dowel in the same place I had inserted already. And you need to make sure when you're passing the dowel through in, you're not going to tilt it, but push it in straight through down all the way. And all the 5 dowels gone in. Now to check for the position of the board, I will still keep that wooden rod that I had already put in, and I'm going to pass through this center board through that center dowel that I had placed. Now, how much ever weight I'm just going to push it in. You can see the dowels that I had inserted, they are going to hold the weight and the sponges are not going to be pushed down. So that's the whole logic. Whatever weight I'm putting in, the dowels will take and the sponges will be intact. Now, I could remove this right now because this entire double barrel is going to go as part of a tiered cake, right? So the position for this center hole, to figure that out and make sure we are aligning that hole of the bottom board and this board, we had placed that wooden rod or the wooden dowel. Now, without changing the position, I'm just applying ganache here. And then now on top of this, I'm going to start placing the sponges. Okay, now filling will start. Now this one portion of dowel placing on a double barrel. You have any doubts on that? Where to get this big double cutter from? This big double cutter is from Homecraft again. Any queries here till the double placement for a double barrel cake? Or is it clear? Why are we placing the wooden dowels there on the layers of the cake? Okay, so I'll wait for the answer. I still will continue with the process. Second layer, and then about some filling. Just taking all the excess ganache and I'm going to put them on top, use an offset spatula and then spread it out before I place the last layer. Ma'am, these acrylic boards have always got to be 0.25 bigger than the sponge. Yes, yes, Geeta. The acrylic boards, when you buy, especially for the board to board method, get them in a 0.25 size bigger than the size of your cake. Placing dowels is very much useful. Thanks. Don't you use any moisture for soaking the sponges? See, you could use moisture, but if you have like a good vanilla butter cake, you don't need to be soaking. I don't soak the butter cakes, but if you're using an oil sponge, then I soak it as well. So it depends on what sponge I am using. Just doing a bit of a cleanup because that's like a lot of ganache spilt over. So I still have to place one more layer of cake on the top. Okay, so it's a better working table now. So one more sponge goes on top. Now after this, the technique will begin for the sharp edges. Now it looks straight. Okay, so now let's just revise through and then understand if it was like a non-double barrel, okay, and if it was a double barrel, how different is it all going to be? Now for a double barrel, you know, we had put 3 layers and we stopped there, and to make sure the bottom board and the board that is there after the 3 layers on the bottom, there is a smaller board, right? To align that smaller board's hole in the center and the board at the bottom, there is a hole. To align the both holes, we have inserted a wooden dowel through the hole of the bottom board and placed the center board. And that way we know that the holes are in alignment, okay? Now, once we have done that, we remove the board, we created a smaller circle, and in that circle, we placed the dowel marking on that circle that I did using a toothpick. And every dowel, one next to the other, should be 2 inches apart. After making the dowel marking, I inserted the dowels. I cut them after doing the pencil marking. And for each of that, I removed and I marked and I cut 5 dowels and I inserted in the dowel marking. So that way, for a double barrel, we have placed the dowels, and with the center wooden dowel, I had passed through that 5.25 inches board, placed it, after which I removed the wooden dowel out. And then I started layering the 3 other cakes. Now this part of the wooden dowel coming into picture, the other plastic dowels, the 5 numbers of them cut, placed, and then the 5.25 inches board that was placed in. All that section is part of your double barrel handling. So when you have a taller cake where the height is more than the diameter, that is the step you need to follow, because now any weight that goes on top, now there is no dowel in here. So these sponges will get pressed down, okay, that you can see there, right, on the video. But these 3 sponges will not get squished down. Why? Because there are dowels there and they will hold the weight. And in our wedding cake, there could be more tears coming and sitting on top, and we don't want the sponges to get squished down, for which that wooden dowel is so very important. Now we have handled the double barrel, and that is the only part that might have been new to you. What you need to keep in your mind is that area of the double barrel handling or double barrel stacking, adding the dowels. Now, the entire layers have come in picture. After this, the ganaching part is the same for a non-double barrel or even if it is a double barrel. So from now on, it is the same technique. Now, when you're doing a double barrel, it's the same process. Now, if you're not doing a double barrel, then the dowel area will not come in picture. After layering the cake, we will be doing the sharp edges. And that is what we are going to start now. For the sharp edges, there are 2 boards, right? One we have placed, and this is the exact same size that is going to go and sit on the top. Now, before this is going to go and sit on the top, this particular board has to be cling wrapped. So I have the cling wrap with me, and I will cling wrap this board, which is the same size as the board that is placed on the bottom of the cake. That is a 6.25 inches, right? So cling wrap is done. And now on top of this, I have to be adding ganache. Let me just take out the cake crumbs. So the board is cling wrapped, and before placing the acrylic board, I will just apply some ganache. And this cling wrap, where you can peel the paper, right? The cling wrap sheet is, I can remove on the side. Now this will be facing the top, which you need to keep in mind. Now, offset spatula. Let me just spread and even it out before placing the top board. Now this part should be evened out, leveled as much possible. Okay, so once it's done, I'm going to place the acrylic board like I showed. The part that you are peeling out, right? This part, that should be facing the top. Now I will place this board on the top, use my hands, and then make sure it's stuck well. I just do like a jiggle, shaking a bit. Okay, and now for me to understand if this particular board and the bottom board are aligned, this particular board and the bottom board are aligned, I need to have tall scrapers, obviously, because it is double barrel. I also have the shorter ones if they are not too tall. Now, because I am handling a taller cake, I will be using the tall scrapers. Now for this board and this board alignment, I need to check for which I just need to, it is better. I remove this cake and place it on my table and not the turntable, and place the scraper. I'll do the sides also. Place a scraper on this working board flat, and I will push through on both the sides. Now when I do that, I need to make sure the acrylic board should be touching the scraper on both the top and the bottom. Acrylic boards should be touching the scraper. Just pushing the cake in. Because when the acrylic board touches the scraper, it should not be touching the cake. I will move this cake around and do the same process. Push the acrylic board with the scraper exactly on opposite sides. I feel like maybe the sponge is a bit too outside here. So I'm pushing that sponge in. So the sponge doesn't touch the scraper. Because now if I'm going to put the ganache and I don't want the scraper to be touching the sponge. Now if my scraper is touching the sponge, either the first step is to just press it through, and even if my scraper is touching the cake, then I need to chop off a bit of the cake. So pushing through the acrylic boards with the scraper on either side is important to make sure the both on the top and then the bottom is aligned. Now I will do that around as long as it makes it easier for me for the scraper to push through on either side, and then the boards are touching the scraper on either side. So you're checking for the touching point on 4 areas, which is this acrylic board and the bottom touching the 2 ends or 2 areas of the scraper. So that way I've just aligned my board on the bottom and then on the top. Now when I'm going to use a scraper around, if the scraper touches the cake, I will use a knife and then cut through the cake, because I don't want the cake to be protruding on the outside. Now I know that the boards on the top and the bottom are aligned and they are straight. Now the level on the top I need to check by using a level, for which I will just open up this cling wrap just a bit. And even if you're using an Apple or an Android, in your phone, you can look for an app called Spirit Level or Bubble Level, and anything that is similar to the one that I'm using here. On the slides, you can just show. So the app is anything like this, okay? And there will be 2 lines which shows the X and the Y. And because it is vertical, this is showing only X. Now, it should be on the top. I think this should be visible. Yes, right, on the top. Okay. So now, on the spirit level, there will be a button for calibration. When I do that, the X and the Y will turn to 0, 0. Okay. You have to first do that, and when you're doing that, the cake should be on the table where you're doing the calibration. So X is 0 and the Y is also 0. And after calibration on the table, you will put that phone on the acrylic board, and when the value is not 0, you will be just pressing out on the top, leveling the top and making sure there is a 0 value for the X and Y on this app. And when that is done, you have leveled the top as well, and you put the cling wrap back, and after which you are ready to go with the sharp edges. For the sharp edges, we will get back onto the turntable, put this back on the turntable, and I'm going to do the ganaching part by part. Now, I'm sure in this part, the cake is going to touch the scraper. Now, what I'm going to do, just go around on the sides, I think you can see. See, wherever the cake is touching the scraper, now if I'm going to apply the ganache, it is going to come in between. Now here at this part, you can see there is gap. The scraper is not touching the cake, but the places where the scraper is touching the cake, I will use a knife, serrated knife, and I'm going to chop off the cake. So this part I'm sure is cutting serrated knife. So that is also one crucial step that you need to keep in mind. If the scraper touches the cake, you will just chop that off. Any excess cake that is projecting outside of the acrylic board will be chopped. So when I'm going to use a scraper around, I don't want the sponge to be coming in between. Just thin layers, don't chop off too much. So I'll do the scraper test again. I check where the scraper touches the cake, chop it off. So I'm just doing that slowly. So my rest of the process will be without any hassle, because you don't want the cake to be seen after you have ganached. So now as I'm scraping around, see there is no place where the cake is touching the scraper. So at this stage, I'm ready to start applying the ganache on the sides. Now what I'm going to do now, right now, as I work, I'm going to apply the ganache starting from the top board and go all the way till the bottom. And I'm not going to do this to the entire side of the cake. I'm just going to work in parts. So apply from the top board to the bottom board. And that's why we call board to board. So this sides I'm going to work on in 3 parts only. I don't want to cover the entire side as of now. I'm also getting some hot water, which I will show you why I need that. This part is easier with a piping bag. You can also use, pick it up from your bowl and use a spatula. So I'm adding excess ganache to start with because I will be scraping off all the excess, so not to worry. So I have quite a bit of the excess, and I'm just going to smear up a bit first. Because with the piping bag, there could be some air pockets that are caught in. So I'm going to just press it through to remove any air pockets. So once this step is done, I'm going to use the scraper to scrape. Okay, a clean scraper on the side. I'm going to place the scraper here on the working board, and now this scraper is going to touch both the top of this acrylic board and the bottom acrylic board, and I'm going to turn around and make sure the scraper is touching both the acrylic boards at all times. Okay, so now scraped off the excess bowl. Now this excess ganache, I'm just going to scrape it through into another bowl. Now as I do that, you can see the ganache is just stuck onto this scraper, right? I need to wipe that out and always have a clean scraper. And this I'm sure you guys miss out each time, but that is very important to go back with a hot or a clean scraper. Now the test that you need to first ask yourself or check is the acrylic board on the top, the edge of the acrylic board at the bottom, and then the top should be seen. Now you can see the edge of the acrylic board is not seen. It is covered with ganache, which means I need to go and then scrape some more. Now, more pressure, scraping a bit more. Show fully. So, okay, so now on the edge, you can see there is some more ganache here, which means I have to scrape more. You can see this edge is starting to be seen. Here also it is starting to be seen. We need to do the check on the bottom as well. So bottom acrylic board is like quite seen at this stage. And now here on this scraper, I have quite a bit of ganache. Now I will scrape it into the bowl and wipe this, because this is like a dried ganache which will go back onto the ganache surface and give you imperfections. So wipe it out, and now here is a bowl of hot water I have, right? And because that is in a bowl and this scraper is quite tall, I have like a spoon, and I will heat up this edge part by pouring of water on this one edge. I also need to be holding. Now I'm inserting or heating up the scraper with the hot water, drip off the hot water and not wipe it now. I'll go back, scraper on the working board, just scrape through. You can add pressure. How does it look? The edges are clean. The acrylic board is seen now, but I will be again wiping off this scraper and do this step every time after this. Now, once you've started using the hot water, clean your scraper, heat up. Now that hot water will just smoothen out the sides and then it will just give you smooth finish here, right? So only one part. Now for the check that you need to do, top acrylic board edge is seen, bottom acrylic board edge is seen. There are no air pockets and the sides are super smooth. Now at that stage, we are ready to move over to the next stage. Now, as long as this particular whole side that I've applied, if it is not perfect, I will not move over to the next part. Now, because this part is perfect now, I am going on to the next part to pipe ganache. So that's why I said we will be working part by part. Just removing off the crumbs. As I said, I will do it in 3 parts. Now this would be my second part. I have one more part to do. Now, because I'm using piping bag, I will use the offset spatula to press it down and remove the air pockets, right? Because you've been piping and then if there are gaps in between each of the piping, and that you will just press it down and then level it from the inside. Now, once that is done, scraper again. Now, each time, because I've already started using hot water scraper, I will just check if my scraper is clean. It is not. So, I will wipe this end with a wet towel and dunk this into the bowl of the hot water. And then scrape it. You will start from even the section that we have already finished. So, and from there, just scrape board to board. I have quite a bit that has come out. I'm going to remove off the cake crumbs attached to ganache, which is here, because I want my ganache to be clean. I'm just removing that part out, which is caught up on the cake crumbs. Now, there's leftover ganache here. I'll wipe it out. Now go check. I think this part, it is just washed up so much. Let me just check now. Now, if the scraper is not touching, it is just removed off quite a bit of the ganache there. I'm just going to pick up this ganache, all the leftover that I've put. They are clean ganache, but I'm just going to pick up that and then spread it here because it is scraped off excess. Now that my scraper is not touching that part at all. So if you're going to spread it out with a spatula, it will be like this. You start from the bottom board and go all the way till the top board. You will not touch the section that you've already completed. I'm just going to scrape from board to board. Now you can see quite a bit of air bubbles there. Now I'm going to dip this in hot water. Smooth out and see if there are air bubbles, if the board is seeing. So I have one air bubble there. I'm going to fill that air bubble with some more ganache. Again, hot water. Just dripping off the hot water, not wiping it, and scrape around. So it looks smooth now, and I will fill up the last section as well. So that will be the third part. So we have one last part which is not having the ganache. Just using the spatula to push the ganache that I've just added, and then I will use the scraper. There are air bubbles. I'm just going to use hot water. I'm sure you can check the air bubbles here, right? On the sides there. Because the scraper was not hot or even wet. So go around and then check for the air bubbles. Apply the ganache in places where there are air bubbles, and then use the hot scraper to fix them. So again, go section by section. Just clean up one small area and then move over. So each time I'm just cleaning the scraper, heating it up. And if I see an air bubble, I'll go fix it. So now because of the ganache's consistency and then that we are using a hot scraper, the ganache could be getting soft at this stage. And now when you feel scraping it a few times is not letting your surface on the side smooth out, at this stage you can just pop it in the freezer for like half an hour and then still continue on the sides. But I'm just going to work and then fix the side. But obviously there is a stage when after we have fixed and worked on the sides to make it smooth, we will have to pop this in the freezer for about half an hour. And only then we'll be able to remove the top acrylic board. Okay, so the sides, I don't have any air bubbles. The sides are straight and the acrylic board on the top and then the bottom is seen. And those are the rules that you need to ensure before you come to this stage. Now, once you have the sides smooth without any air pockets, clean off the board and then pop it in the freezer. Now, if you don't have such a tall freezer space, you can put it in the fridge for like 1 hour, after which we can remove the top of the acrylic board. So this will be stage 1. And yes, now you can hear no voice. Yes, can you hear now? Yes, right. Okay. So this needs to go into the freezer. I am going to put it in the freezer because I have like a good freezer space. If you do not have, this will go into the fridge at this stage. Now I could also just do a bit of cleanup here, remove the excess ganache so it looks neat. So removing off the cling wrap on the top and then the acrylic board and finishing the top will happen after that hour. Now, as per the agenda, like I said, rough stone texture, marble effect and draping of the hexagon dummy is going to be pushed to the back. And we are going to continue with wafer paper lily and wafer paper bougainvillea because those are also the flowers that we will be learning today. And this going into the freezer and that 1 hour, I want to do something else because we don't have to wait. So I will clean up, put this in the freezer, set up the table for doing the wafer paper, lily and bougainvillea. Are there any questions that are not answered yet as of now? What is the app called? Is like Spirit Level or Bubble Level. You can search for that in your Play Store or the Apple thing and whatever you get. You can keep trying. That looks similar to what I had used. What is the height of the tall scraper? Then there are several heights. I think this is 12 inches what I have. There is 8, 10, 12, depending on what is the height of the cake that you will be working on. Can you use normal cake boards instead of acrylic boards? See, normal cake boards, because I use a hot water method, the normal cake boards, the paper part stuck to the scraper with the water, and now it just gets moist and dirty. So I prefer using acrylic board. I think that's it, no? 0.25 inches extra is the board's height. Please write here. Can somebody type from our team? Spirit level or bubble level. You can search those words on your app store, and that will be the name of the app. The exact app's name is like, it changes obviously, but you can look for one that is similar, which has the X and the Y axis, and that also has the calibrate button. Okay. Okay, so this one is from the freezer. I'm just going to open up the cling wrap, remove the acrylic board first. Okay, and leaving the cling wrap the cake, and then gently peeling the cling wrap out of the cake. Now, there will be dents on the top, and I have the ganache here, which I've microwaved, and it is like quite soft now. I will pick up the ganache using the offset spatula and fill in the dents on the edge. And just go around. I will level the top, and I have the scraper. A smaller one is enough. Just use the scraper on top, turn the turntable, keep turning the turntable, and just scrape down and then level the top. There will be excess obviously, which I will just scrape it down in the bowl. And now once I've done that, obviously, you cannot go back to the cake with a ganache here on this scraper. Wipe it clean. Okay, and I have a bowl of hot water. I'm going to dip the scraper in the hot water, drip off the excess, and I'm going to do the same thing on the top again. Okay, there is excess. I'll remove that, scrape it off. Heating up the scraper. So the scraper is clean on the side that it will touch the cake. Just cleaning the top. And in that process, the sharp edges would be touching, and a little bit of disturbance will be there here on the edge that you can see. So now I'm just going to hold the scraper here, gently run it through on the top. The craft knife. And now this edge, either I could choose to put this in the freezer and then cut. Will just show this. And or now I'm just going to use the the craft knife, I'm going to dip it in hot water. I'm going to just remove off this excess from the top. But each time I'm going to remove the excess. Just cut through this with a hot craft knife. Just a bit of mess up here. So as a step, one more step, I am going to put this into the freezer to cut the top. In that way, it is just going to have a clean cut. Let me try one last time. So if you are going to fiddle between the sides and the sharp edges on the top, it's better to freeze that once. And just work on. If you're in a hurry, then you could just work on one last time. Just removing the excess. You could also touch your finger because the cake is quite frozen. Touch your finger in. A wet finger, and then the water is quite hot. Just run it through around. If there are any very minor imperfection, you just fix it with your wet finger. Okay, I think the sharp edges looks fine now. The sides are clean and straight. And now, so with the sharp edges lesson, if you have any doubts, you could just text. I had another doubt on the wafer paper. It looks a bit of paper look, right? See, that is because there is only one shade of pink I had used, and the green center and the pink stamen that I made, they are not dusted yet. Okay. So now if you want it realistic, what we could do to make it realistic, there is a center pink, right? You could give two shades, like the bottommost could be a darker pink, and then the tip of the petal could be like a lighter pink, or both the ends can be darker, the center can be light. So if you have depth in the color, then the flowers start becoming realistic. Now, because we have just made it with one color, it kind of looks like paper. Okay, but the technique of making the lily is quite as much. Okay, so this one I'm going to pop it in the fridge right now, because as per agenda, once we have finished the 6-inch double barrel, we move on to draping a double barrel cake. Now, The technique for draping a double barrel or a non-double barrel, which is like any size and diameter, will remain the same. So you will just understand how to drape a cake. I mean, nothing to do with being a double barrel or non-double barrel, okay? So we clear up. While I'm still rolling up the fondant in the next part of the video, this will still be in the fridge because I want it to be quite firm. But in that lesson, I'll tell you how long you could keep it in the fridge or if there is like too much condensation and stuff like that, because you can't do that like after 3-4 hours. It will still work, but there'll be a lot of condensation. So, but I've ganache now, like say maybe in the next, say 20-25 minutes, we will be draping this. But until then, it will be in the fridge. Fridge is like the regular place where water is still liquid and cold. It is not the freezer. So we just clean up. Question was, do you soak your, why am I not soaking my cake? Because butter cakes I don't soak. I want the butter cakes original texture to be as it is when people eat that. So the original moisture of my butter cake remains intact. How? After taking it out of the oven in like 10 to 15 minutes, I cling wrap the cake in 2 layers and I freeze the cake before I start layering it. And once I layer and finish the ganache, I put it in the fridge so it does not dry. Ideally, when you guys ask a question saying that should I soak a cake to not let the cake dry, the feeling of dryness in the cake is there. That in general happens because you cool down the cake out of the oven to complete room temperature, or then it is lying there for like an hour or two before you're using it for layering or something. And those are the times when the sponge is exposed to room temperature for a prolonged period of time. Your cakes naturally dry out. It is not even its original texture. And just because you allowed it to dry in room temperature, you are adding in more syrup to it and changing the texture just because you need it moist. And that's not the right way of doing it. So butter cakes or any cake for that matter out of the oven, 10 minutes, cling wrap, even while the sponge is hot. Cling wrap and freeze it. You're intact, putting the moisture of the cake intact within the sponge and then retaining its original moisture and texture of the sponge. That is so very important. I do that to all my cakes. I teach that process to all the students who are doing the baking part of the session as well. Oil cake, yes, depending on what filling or frosting you're using, you can soak it. Depending, whatever syrup you could use. A simple sugar syrup is the basic to start with. Now, if you are doing the layering part in a way that works for you, you will continue to do that. Because now, just because I say don't moisten your butter cake, because I know how to handle my butter cake and then retain its natural moisture in the cake. That part is being handled for me, right? Now, if you're going to just not soak your butter cake and then your cake is dry because you are, the first process, somewhere you're drying up your cake and you need to handle it appropriately. So if you are sure that your cakes are dry, and sugar syrup is the one that is going to save your cakes from having the feeling of being dry, continue to use the syrup, right? Can we scroll that down for the rest of the questions? Something there on the top which says butter. Can we use oil instead of butter? You cannot use oil instead of butter in a recipe. A recipe has to be followed as it is. But if we fridge the butter cake, it will become hard. After doing icing, we have to keep it in fridge. Yes, for storing overnight, it has to be in fridge. A butter cake or even a ganached cake has to be thawed in room temperature 2 to 3 hours. Say 3 hours in room temperature before you allow your clients to cut the cake. Only for storing and not drying up, you have to refrigerate. Ma'am, when we cling wrap and it is hot, then we open cling wrap, it becomes sticky. It does not become sticky basically because you're completely covering it. Stickiness will happen when, say, cling wrapping or putting in the freezer. Taking it out of the freezer, there'll be condensation. Now, if you remove the cling wrap immediately after taking out of the freezer, the condensation will happen on the top of the cake and that is the stickiness. You have to take it from the freezer and leave it in the room temperature for like 30 minutes. So the water droplets happen on the outside of the cling wrap. After the condensation goes, then you remove the cling wrap and then the stickiness won't be there. In the same ratio that is given for the butter in your shared recipe, you cannot change butter and oil in any recipe. A recipe given with precise measurements have to be followed as exactly as it is. One more question. This recipe you shared is half kg sponge. See, to understand what is the kg of any sponge, you add all the ingredients given on the right side and see what is the weight of that and reduce like say 50 grams from it, and then you know what is the sponge's weight, because that recipe is precise for a certain texture that is the output of the cake. Depending on how much kg you want, you can add, multiply that ingredients into 2 or divided by 2 and then get a smaller portion or a bigger portion, that will work. Okay, so let's move on to draping. I have the fondant. I'm using magic colors. So there are two parts in draping. Now the cake is in the fridge, but I have measured the height of the cake. It is 18.5 centimeters. I'm going to have like say 20 centimeters as the height, and the diameter of the cake will be the board itself. So I'm just going to measure the diameter in centimeters. I'm going to pass through this middle hole to check it is 16 in diameter and the height is 18.5. So obviously I'm just going to keep like 20. Now, why I did the diameter? To know the circumference. So there are two parts in draping. The top is a circle disc, for which I will use this acrylic board itself and then cut out and then place the top disc on top of the cake. Now for the wrapping around, so we are going to use a paneling method, and that method you could use for a regular cake of a shorter size or then like a taller cake also. I use the same method for all the cakes height, irrespective of what the height is. Now the height is one side, so I need a rectangle sheet of fondant to wrap around. Now the height is one side of the measurement that I need. To wrap around, what I need is a circumference of the circle. To understand the circumference of the circle, I have to do a bit of math. So this is the board, which is the top of the cake, right? Because this is the board we used to do the ganache for the board to board, and I removed this board and this board is with me. 16 centimeters. So to find the circumference, the math will be 16 into 3.14, which is the pi d. D is the diameter. That is the circumference of circles mathematical formula. So someone do 16 into 3.14 and type out the answer, and that will be the circumference for me. 16 into 3.14. 50.24 is the answer. You could also just do that in the calculator. So that 3.14 is always a constant. So whatever is the diameter, you will multiply that by 2.14, and whatever number you have is a 50.24. So I will have like 5 centimeters in excess. So I need a 55 extent of the sheet and height will be 20. So the sheet that I'm going to roll, 55 by 20 is what I'm going to roll. And for the top, I will use this disc. So this a bit of mathematics you might have to just know. So I'm going to take first a small portion to cut out the top disc. I'm going to leave the fondant covered and not leave it open. Dust some corn flour. Take the fondant and then do a basic kneading. Just stretch, pull and stretch, pull and stretch. I'm going to use a rolling pin and then roll it out. Just looking for the thickness I need. I don't want it like too thin, too thick. Now I have a butter paper. I'll tell you why I'm using that. I'm going to place butter paper and place a sheet of fondant on top of it. And I'm going to place this particular acrylic board on top and use the craft knife and then cut out this disc. Run through the craft knife again for a cleaner cut. I'll just save this fondant with the rest and wrap it up. Now, because the fondant will be a little too soft at this stage, and if I don't have the parchment paper at the bottom, it will stretch and the shape of it will change. So I'm just cutting it out. I will have to remove this acrylic board. So the acrylic board is removed. And this, if I have to move, if the paper is not there, then if I'm lifting this, then it will stretch for me, right? So to avoid that, I'm going to do this, let it dry for some time. So it is not too stretchy for me when I'm placing it on the top. So this disc is cut and it is placed aside for now. I'm going to take this entire portion. There could be excess, which I will just cut it out. Now let me start with kneading it a bit. So let me roll it in the shape of a log anyway, because I need a rectangular sheet. And then corn flour. Which fondant brand is good? Magic Colors, Magicalata is quite good. You can try all the other brands that are available and see whichever works for you, you could use. But I'm using Magic Colors one and it is quite good. So I'm just dusting corn flour on the fondant as well. So I'm just going to hold the rolling pin diagonally to the shape of the log of the fondant and start with rolling out. Do you know what is the size that we are going to roll this out? 55 by 20. Why Tylose is not required? Why do you use Tylose with your fondant? Sneha, you tell me, why are you using Tylose? Where are you using Tylose? And you tell me, why are you using it? And then I'll tell you why I am not using it. In the meantime, let me just keep rolling. What I'm looking at is a 55 by 20, right? So I'll try and maintain the rectangle shape as I roll. So you need to make sure if the fondant is sticking to the counter. The Tylose powder is used to dry the fondant figure, right? So you're making figurine, then you will use Tylose. But this particular fondant, are we using it to make a figurine? And then why should you dry the fondant out when you are draping a cake? Do you want a dry fondant on your cake? Otherwise, what is the purpose of using Tylose to fondant, which you're using to drape a cake? You have the bigger scale, which measures 55, longer scale. Let me check the size. This one has about 45. So almost 55 is there. I needed 20, right? There is like almost more than 20. But let me just even out. So the size is just there. I'll just even out. How many kgs of fondant is this, ma'am? It's almost about a kg. This one. 2. So I have just taken, I think, 2 kgs for this double barrel. 1. Yes, it is a 1 kg of this particular color, but we will have quite a bit of excess. So because we are going to cut out, but you start with a kg, but roll it to the thickness you want. And there will be quite a bit of excess left over. So if your counter is sticky, then you can use a craft mat. Okay, so this looks like a neat sheet of fondant. I will have 55, quite a bit. And so let me just start by cutting out this rounded side and one side as well. Let me just straighten it out. And we need 20 is the height, right? So let me use the scale and mark a 20 at equal intervals. And then I'm just going to run a pizza cutter on all the markings of 20 centimeter. That will be the height that I need, right? So gently pass through all the marking of 20 centimeter. So all this is excess. And then I need a 55, right? So I'll just go to the cake with just what I need. So there was a 45 and then I'm just doing a 55 here. 45 plus 10. So this entire lot is a excess, which I will just knead it right back and cling wrap and store it. I'm sure about like more than half a kg of fondant was used for this cake. Okay, so let's get the cake. So it's come from the fridge. So it is going to condense and it is going to get moisture. So because it has come from the fridge, I'm just going to place the top disc. The top disc is there with a butter paper on the bottom. And it is dried out a bit. It's not going to be stretchy anymore. I'm just going to place the top disc first. Now, is it audible? I'm sorry about that. It's been like quite a few times of voice not clear. Okay, so just change the battery for the mic. So I'll continue. I was just saying you need to have like clean water and just go on with the bare minimal requirement of water is all you need. And if your buttercream is quite firm, you can go on and then brush over buttercream as well if you feel it is dry. But ideally, ganache only has like more of a dry surface than buttercream. So water is brushed out. And what I need here, I'm going to roll this sheet of fondant on this rolling pin, which does not have a handle. Okay, now I also need the corn flour. So you need one edge of this rolling pin to get aligned with this bottom sheet. So I'm going to place it here. I mean, I'm not going to place it like this. I want to place with this rolling pin aligned with this bottom line of the sheet of fondant. And as you're rolling, this bottom part, before it gets stuck to this top part, I want to dust this with corn flour. Otherwise, when you're unrolling it, it is going to stick. So keep rolling it. Excess corn flour we could dust and then clean up at the end. For now, our goal is the sheet of fondant should not stick as we are unrolling. So now it's completely rolled on this rolling pin like that. Okay, I'm going to pull this cake through the middle and I'm going to make sure the bottom is intact. Top, there will be excess, obviously. You can just roll around the rolling pin and move around. But what I'm going to do, I am turning the cake only for you guys to have a better visibility. You can just go around, roll the rolling pin. For you, the goal is bottom alignment. This rolling pin is flat down on that board. And there is going to be an overlap here, obviously because we measured excess. Okay, so now on this overlap, I'm going to have a clean cut. Obviously, in this method, there is going to be a line. But we want that line to be neat and straight. So I'm going to use like a longer scraper. I'm going to pass through the fondant on the overlap, a bit on the sheet that is at the behind one and then on the top. Just hold the scraper and then press through and cut this top as well. Press through both the layers. Now, you can also use a craft knife to make sure the cut is clean. This layer will come out by itself. Now, you need to gently open out this layer and remove that excess from the layer behind as well. And for which, through that line, I'm doing a clean cut, removing off that sheet and gently placing this back. So that line is quite neat. Though the seam is going to be there, you want that seam to be quite clean. Corn flour marks can be wiped off, not to worry, but just check if it is straight, smooth. And if that draping was clean, you don't even need a smoother, but well, you could run the smoother once, a fondant smoother, to just see if there are any air bubbles. Now this excess on the top to be cut, turntable, turntable, turntable. I'll see if I'm able to cut it now, or we just need to be frozen a bit so that the fondant is nice and frozen and the cutting happens Precisely. If it is stretchy, then the edge is not going to be clean. I'll try to cut now, or I'm going to freeze it and make that fondant firm and then get back to cut it. Obviously, it is stretchy a bit. Just going to clean this up. Just looking for any extras here and there. Okay, so I'm going to use a bit of vodka at the end. Obviously, you'll be asking for an vodka replacement. You can use Sheenex from Magic Colors or Evaprex from Fab, and we could clean up. So now just look at the sides, the smooth finish and the sharp edges. We just work out with two smoothers just on the edge. Okay, so we've covered the fondant, and that's the most easiest and the seamless way of having sharp edges and clean and smooth sides, and that you can use to any size for that matter. Okay, so let me read through the questions. Do we need to add any edible gum to drape the fondant? No, I just use water. Water is quite fine. My place is very humid. I'm staying in coastal area, and whenever I use fondant for my cakes, it usually gets sticky, loses its shape. In a situation, what I must do? Chennai is also a coastal area, right? It is also a humid place, but for fondant, obviously, if it is humid and you're not able to handle, um, you'll work in an AC room. So if you are a fondant artist and you have quite a bit of requirement to working with fondant, then have like a smaller room for you with AC. Keep all the doors and windows closed and don't even have fan on in that room, and have the AC when you're working with fondant, and that way you will cut out on the humidity from the outside, and you are safe in a non-humid cool room, and that is ideal for fondant. One more question. Which brand of fondant to use? I have used Magic Colors. Magic Color fondant is really good. You could try that if you have access to that. That's it. Okay. So as per agenda, we will be doing stencil on top. You'll have to be cleaning this up before doing the stencil part. You have the vodka, we can just brush it now only. You just brush it now So I'll just show you how to remove the corn flour marks, but it needs to dry up a little bit. So when you're clearing up, and then I will have the royal icing set up for stencil, or I'll clear it up, let it to dry, and then move over to the fondant lace tiles, and that will go on a 8-inch cake, which is the tier that is bottom to that. So until then, let the vodka part dry, and then we can come back to doing stenciling on this particular cake. Which brand of, ma'am, royal icing has egg white? Is there any eggless? See, eggless royal icing, obviously right now what people are using outside is the powder form that is available. Eggless royal icing powder is available, and then you can mix it with water and use. Magic Colors also has that one. You can also try the aquafaba. For every egg white, 30 grams of aquafaba, and then follow the exact same recipe, and it still works. But you just need to get the aquafaba, and then the question comes asking, the aquafaba is expensive and you need something less expensive, but then an eggless. You can buy out the ready-made royal icing. That will be much preferable for the eggless option. So that is vodka. Any brand is fine, which means you don't need like the expensive vodka for this purpose, because vodka does not stay in the cake. It evaporates. It just cleans up and then evaporates. By brushing the cake with the vodka does not mean we are feeding anybody with vodka. But for religious purposes, if you're not supposed to use vodka on cake, then you can use the non-alcoholic substitutes that are available, which is Shinex from Magic Colors, Evaporex, which is well known by all. That is from the brand Fab. But if alcohol is okay for you, and if you are with a thought that by brushing it on the cake, you are selling an alcoholic cake, no, it doesn't work like that. So if vodka is okay for you, just stick to vodka. So the sides are clean. The top also, I'm just running the brush through once. So I'll allow this vodka to dry. The clean outer will remain, while the vodka will evaporate. So the shine will not be there if we are using vodka. Once the vodka dries, it will be clean but not shiny, right? So we clear up, and then we get back on the fondant lace styles. I look for some more questions. I do the same, but when cake goes in client hand, they complain. Don't brush and then give it immediately. You have to allow the vodka to completely dry out in your place. So that's not the last thing for you to do. You need to do that upfront, and then allow good amount of time for the vodka and the alcohol smell to just be not there on the cake. You need to allow it to dry, right? But still you have that complaint, and you really don't want to do that. The next thing is to have a steamer, the inhaler stuff, right? The medical shop thing. You have the steam coming out, and so you can just go around and then steam the entire thing. But then obviously you cannot brush it. But if there is like too much corn flour there, then maybe that remains and has a white patch. But you could just dust all the excess corn flour and then run through steam all around. That also works. Okay, Sneha's already said that. Use water steam. Water steam is the next option. And if you don't want to do vodka, okay. So I'm going to allow this to dry.